Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me out there. We're going to kick things off. My name's Mike McMullen. I'm president of the Chamber. I want to thank you all for coming. Before I turn things over to our new chair of the board and our MC, I would be remiss if I didn't wish a happy birthday to somebody who shaped my life but has been gone now since 2008, and that's my dad. I was the youngest. I think I had to have been an actual mistake. A lot of you guys out there would say, yeah, I've known that you're a mistake. Look at Steve. I know, Steve. My dad was almost 50 years old. Not quite like Bill Belichick's relationships, but my dad was almost 50 when I was born. He was born in 1910, and he died in 2008 at 98 years old. So happy birthday, Dad. And on that note, let's give him a round of applause. And I want to take this time now to turn things over to our MC, who's the new chair of the board for this year, and you guys all know him as Mr. CMC Richard Turner. Come on, Richard.
Thanks very much. It's certainly an honor to serve as the chair of the board for the Chamber of Commerce. And as you may have heard me say, that I think it's one of the easier jobs in Carroll County because of all the great work. How about another hand for Mike McMullen and all the staff, right? You know, I know today is a great opportunity. We always try to think about the rites of spring, and I've mentioned this when we have Ted Zaleski come in. It's kind of like my first rites of spring is knowing that Ted's talking about the budget, and therefore, you know, the Super Bowl is over with. Because we won't talk too much about the Super Bowl. We have a couple of Eagles fans in the audience, but. We know that Orioles are ready for spring season, right? They've already got the batteries in place. Pitchers and catchers are already in place, so we know spring is coming. And with that, we know we also have Ted bringing us information about the budget. So it's really great to have Ted Zaleski here. You know, I want to also recognize the fact that I get double duty now because I get to say that our crew is here recording this for future prosperity, and you'll be able to see. So thanks to our crew from CMC. And I want to introduce our four sponsors. So Sherry, Tracy, and Bolin from the principal at Brown Plus is here. Sherry is here. Get a hand for Sherry. Dave Peliquin. Is Dave here? Where's Dave? Oh. There, all right. Where is he? Somewhere. There he is. All right, Dave Peliquin, president of Main Street Advisors and a Carroll County Chamber member for almost 25 years. Oh, I forgot to mention Brown Plus, almost over 70 years as a member of the Chamber of Commerce. Susan Reed, you'll hear from in a moment as well, who's the new Director of Business Development for the Community Media Center, and Susan Artadia, Executive Director of Fairhaven, our host. So now I'd like to recognize our elected officials, and we'll start with our, our Board of Education. We have Tara Battaglia, who serves as the president of the board. Patricia Dorsey is there. Kristen Zimmer is back over there in the room. And Cindy McCabe, of course, our superintendent of schools. Cindy, great to see you. We also have one of our elected officials from Tawnytown. Chris Tillman is in the house, I believe. Let's see, have I missed any other elected officials who are out there? All right, very good. We did great. This is my first maiden voyage here, so I feel like I'm doing all right. Change it up. All right, let's see, now we'll turn to our past chairs of the Chamber of Commerce. Ben Yingling. Yeah, man. Dave Bollinger. Steve Wantz. Lynn Wheeler is here. And Steve Aquino has done double duty. That's Steve. And now with the current members of the Chamber's Board of Directors, please stand and be recognized. So I have our current members. I know you're out there, don't be shy. All right. I thank all of them because it makes my job easier knowing that I've got great partners and helping guide the organization along and giving me guidance on how to keep Mike in line, right? So, all right. So first, let's turn to our first sponsor, and that would be Sherry, Tracy, and Bolin, the principal at Brown Plus.
Yeah,
Sherry.
Good afternoon. As Richard said, I'm Sherry Tracy Bolin. I'm a tax principal at Brown Plus Accountants and Advisors. I went through the whole name change spiel last year, so hopefully everybody remembers. We are on Main Street in Westminster in Carroll County, and then we have 4 additional offices, one in Frederick, Maryland, Hanover, Pennsylvania, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. Introduce Wanda Lynn is one of our audit principals, A&A principals in Westminster. Many of you know Jack McCracken, who is here, is one of our A&A managers. And Eric Wendler is here as business development. We are your full-service accounting firm offering audit services, comp reviews, business and individual income taxes, nonprofit tax services, all those normal things that you would expect to receive from an accounting firm, but we also have been expanding greatly our advisory services. We do offer a full range of outsourced accounting services from full-time bookkeepers, payroll, and other outsourced CFO services if those are in need, human resource consulting, family-owned business advisory services. We also do have a division called Brown Plus Transitions, which focuses on certified valuations and transitioning your business, either be for the next generation or if you have a buy-serve, you're looking to purchase another business or sell your business. Carly leads that up. We also have just recently, in the last few weeks, added an R&D specialist, so research and development director, Patrick Rogers, who brings 17 years experience to us as a firm in this specific area. So I'm sure Eric will be reaching out to a lot of folks who may not know that this exists. There's state credits and federal credits that could help you save a bunch of tax dollars. So look for that coming your way, and just wanted to bring that to your attention since that's brand new, but we're always looking for different ways to help the businesses in our areas grow and succeed, because it is our mission to provide people with extraordinary outcomes in all that they do in business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry. Sorry, and now we'll hear from Dave Peliquin, President of Main Street Advisors. Dave?
So everybody could look. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here again. See a lot of familiar faces. Main Street Advisors is a registered investment advisor in business since 1999. We manage investments for about 100 clients. We also provide financial planning using Money Guide Pro. So anyone who's looking at doing a very thorough financial plan, software-based, that we then wrap around our own experience to pick out the 2 or 3 areas that are going to be most key in your own financial plan. One thing I'll share with you is it's usually not rate of return or age that's the #1 factor of whether your plan will work. It's your budget. So no one likes it. So no one in here is saying, oh, that's good news. So that's the truth, is that knowing what you're doing now as thoroughly as possible, then being able to project what it's going to be like in 5 or 10 years or whatever the case is the key to the financial plan. So yes, saving enough and not being too aggressive or too conservative, that's important. So that's my tip for the day, if you want to call it that, is if you're not currently using Quicken or anything like that, at least get out the old spreadsheet and do what we used to call a reverse budget. Do it for 3 months. Then try and remember the annual things that you got to pay and the semi-annual things. And it might take 3-4 hours, but it might be the best 3 or 4 hours you ever spent. So anytime you'd like to talk financial planning, we're myself, Melissa Jordan, if Melissa would stand back there. These ladies love the attention. So Melissa Jordan and also Ann Mondor, and Ann's been with us running the operations, and some would say that's everything, but it's not necessarily true. But Ann's been with Main Street Advisors for 22 years, I think. Ann, you didn't stand yet. I can see you back there. So with that said, I'm all done. We'll let Ted take most of the time.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, and next we'll hear, it's my pleasure to introduce Susan Reed, who's the Director of Business Development. She is the new kid on the block at the CMC as we look at new ways in which we can sustain our mission. So Susan, come on up.
Hi. So as Richard said, my name is Susan Reed. I'm the Director of Business Development at the Community Media Center that we so lovingly call CMC. And since joining CMC in November, I have been so impressed at how deeply this organization connects and enriches our community through media. The CMC is a pillar of local engagement, bringing people together and providing a platform where all the voices can be heard. We're a nonprofit, but not what you might expect from a nonprofit, because our mission is simple, but it's really powerful. And it's just to connect our community through media that informs, educates, and empowers. So from high school sports coverage that brings the community together, to municipal meetings that keep citizens informed about our local governance, CMC preserves and amplifies the voices and events that define Carroll County. And a key part of this effort is the Central Maryland Sports Network, or CM Sportsnet as you might know it. It's a programming service of CMC, and this regional sports network is dedicated to filling the widening gap in local sports journalism. With award-winning coverage of Carroll County high school and college sports, including wrestling, boys and girls basketball, and other featured sports, CM Sportsnet ensures that the achievement of our local athletes are celebrated and shared. So however, to keep these vital programs thriving, we really need your support. As more consumers cut the cord from cable and switch to streaming, our funding is rapidly declining. So adapt. We're developing alternative funding opportunities. That's my job. Including sponsorship recognition to supporting CM Sportsnet. So you'll find some flyers on the table with more details, and I'd happy to discuss how you can support our mission after this event. The value that this sponsorship brings to aligning your business with our audience, which has grown over 400% since 2023. Your investment helps sustain this popular programming and ensures we can continue spotlighting our local athletes and their accomplishments. So help us maintain and grow these essential services by supporting CMC. You're investing in a more informed, connected, and empowered Carroll County. Together, we can create opportunities for everyone to engage with the issues that matter. We want to thank some of our CM Sportsnet sponsors, Carroll Community College Links, Aquino Financial Services, Farmers and Merchants Bank, and Barnes & Bollinger Insurance, among others. And you can find our coverage on our website, carrollmediacenter.org, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and airing on our cable channels 19, 23, and HD 1072, which brings our programming directly to the community. Mike always tells you to shop local, but we tell you to watch local.
Great job. All right, thank you, Susan. And welcome. You'll see a lot more of Susan. And last but not least, another Susan. And I want to welcome our host to the stage, Susan Artadia, who's the Executive Director here at Fairhaven. Welcome. I shouldn't say welcome to you. You're welcoming us, right?
Thank you, Richard. Yes, I am welcoming you, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to Fairhaven. Just curious, how many of you have been here before? Little different, huh? In 2019, Fairhaven became part of ACT's Retirement Life Communities. We're headquartered in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania. ACT is the third largest not-for-profit owner and operator and developer of continuing care retirement communities in the United States. Currently, we have 28 campuses. You would have seen all of the campuses, or some. We have 2 more to add to the wall as you passed coming in today. And we provide homes here on campus, in the organization, to over 10,000 residents and employ over 8,000 staff members. Fairhaven is situated on 300 picturesque acres, featuring nature trails, a 3-hole golf course, and a new pickleball court, all raised by monies of our residents. We offer nearly 275 independent living residences for individuals aged 62 and better, with access to assisted living and skilled nursing services on campus. We currently have over 300 residents on campus in independent living. Since our affiliation, we have revitalized the campus with a multi-million-dollar renovation project, which includes the beautiful lobby that you entered and this room. We will be available after the meeting for anyone who would like to take a tour of the campus. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed lunch and enjoy your meeting.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Susan. Well, you all know it's Valentine's week, right? So for the guys, you got your deal all worked out, right? And all your presents all worked out. Well, I realized that I didn't quite have my act together. I knew something was going to, I was going to get myself in a little bit of trouble. So I reached out to a good friend, Tim Weber, and thank you to the Alan for State's Attorney's Office who hires Tim, but also is one of the new members, Cattails Florist. And I said, Tim, I got a little bit of a problem. You got to try and help me out. He says, well, all the orders are already in, Richard. You've really passed the deadline. You've missed this. But he gave me some really great advice, so I'm prepared. He said, you told me you got to get down on one knee and bring this to your wife and say, hon, I went all over the place looking, and I couldn't find something until I finally got the Hoffmans, and I brought you the most valuable thing I could find, a dozen set of eggs. All right, well, I don't know that I'll get over it, but speaking of budget, we have a great opportunity to hear from Ted Zaleski from the county. Most of you know him. He's been with the county for 30 years. He's been the Director of Management and Budget for over 20 years. He is the president of the Maryland Association of Counties Budget and Finance Affiliate since it began a decade or so ago. He's past president of the Maryland Government Finance Officers Association. He served on the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, Budgeting and Fiscal Policy Committee. He also served on the Towson University School of Business and Economics Advisory Committee. He is an adjunct instructor at McDaniel College, and he has helped develop a new public administration and policy graduate program at McDaniel College. Ted has developed also a podcast about the fine details of county finance and budgeting. Actually, no, that's not true. It's about books, his other passion in life. And so the podcast and website, Two Sides to the Story, focuses on books, reading, writing, writers, libraries, and encourages others to enjoy what happens in the literary world. Ted lives in Carroll County just outside of Westminster, and today he's going to talk about the very challenging issues that confront ourselves with the budget. I liken Ted's job a little bit like the autonomous driving out there. You read the fine print. You can take your hands off the wheel, you might be able to sleep, but when an emergency happens, you better have your hands on the wheel. I'm really glad that Ted is here, and he's got here, hopefully, his hands on the wheel. So Ted, here you go.
My car, I get this message on the dashboard now and then that says, steering required. I've always wondered if they really thought if I wasn't steering that somehow was going to fix things. It was an interesting trip in here from the parking lot. Bit of a walk and then through the building. I'm pretty sure there was a place where I saw a Welcome to Pennsylvania sign. And I came in, I was looking for David Pellegrin, and I couldn't find him. I actually asked, is David here? Oh yeah, he's in there. And it wasn't until he got up that I saw that he was here. He's got a bit of a new look. I'm not sure I would have ever recognized him. And is anybody surprised that Mike McMullen was the baby of the family? I mean, can you picture him as the pesky little brother?
That was me.
And one other crowd observation, Rob Burke, the school's CFO, sitting over here. Superintendent's over there. Now, apparently, he's not willing to take a bullet for her. So Dave Bollinger earlier reminded me that he's been to all of these and that even in COVID, Though he struggled with technology, he made it and was available. This was actually on my mind. So could you come up here for a second?
It's going to give me COVID.
I've been doing this since 2004, and Dave has been at every one of them. I have a little present for you.
Thank you, my friend. Perfect attendance. What is it? It's nothing related to Ravens and Steelers, is it?
Yeah, Steelers season tickets.
Oh, hey, darn. How'd you get that done? How do you explain that?
It says Ted's Iron Man. You got a picture of.
It would have been Cal Ripken, but it's got my head on Cal Ripken. That's cool. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Someday there'll probably be one person in the audience. Just be Dave.
That'll be me.
So this isn't really budget, but just looking around the county, another observation. Seems to be the year of the woman in Carroll County. The president of McDaniel, the superintendent of public schools, the president of Carroll Community College, the county administrator, and I'm sure we could find others to add to that list, but 4 very prominent roles, all filled by women now. Although the superintendent is probably saying, I could probably live without this right now. And as I was preparing for this, I usually go back and watch a few other ones, just to remind myself what I've talked about and things. And the AC/DC T-shirt comes up a lot. And there was one year I think I said, I hate to think that when this is all done, maybe the only thing people will remember about this is I wore an AC/DC T-shirt. And I got thinking about it and I said, no, that's not true. They'll remember me for more than just the AC/DC T-shirt. They'll also remember me for the Steelers lanyard. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some things that are directly about Carroll County, but I'm going to spend most of my time on things out there beyond us, just because there's so much big going on. But from a county revenue point of view, we got good news on the last property tax assessment. And as always, for you who got a property tax assessment, you might not agree that it's good news, but from a revenue point of view, it is. So we were able to build into our projections for 26 a noticeable amount of revenue above what we had planned. But it carries further than that, because what happened here is I was kind of making an assumption that the surge in house prices that we saw over the last handful of years, that assessments have pretty much caught up to that. This last assessment, which was Group 1, South Carroll, was, I think, 22% on average. So, it said, no, you haven't caught up. But then in further discussions with the State Department of Assessments Taxation and thinking about things, it would seem the next two, the Northeast and then Westminster and the Northwest, also are probably not caught up yet. So we were able to up our projections for 27 and 28 as well. We don't expect that same kind of growth to carry longer than that, but the revenue line will be higher, and when we start applying that growth, it'll be from a different place. Investment income has been a good news story for us. And how much revenue we get is really dependent on 2 things. How much money do we have available to invest, and what kind of returns are we getting on the investments? So one piece of what's going on that's leading us to have more revenue than we were counting on, and it's more complicated than this, but we have some capital projects with cash on them that haven't moved along as fast as we the first thought they might. So money isn't spent yet, and it's sitting there earning money. And the other is trying to determine what's going to happen to interest rates, especially now, is very difficult. And we had built some projections on an assumption that rates were going to start to fall off. And not saying that that won't happen, but so far there hasn't been a lot of change yet. So we have some maybe more money to invest than we expected, and we're getting better returns than we expected. Income tax, for those of you who have been through this before, you know this is always the big question mark for us. We get our second big distribution of the year in just a couple weeks, but even at that, it's only half of what we will get, roughly half of what we'll get for the whole year. So we end up adopting the budget before we know half of the story on our second biggest revenue. But we are ahead of budget for the year. But a lot of that is about what they call reconciling distributions, or about what happened in previous tax years, not what's happening in this year. So it's hard to know what to take from that to the future. And then most of you might know by now, the county is deep into the process of providing emergency medical services now. Something that goes along with that is there's a process for billing when there's a transport. An ambulance takes somebody to the hospital. Some of that money can be recovered. We're starting to get a good feel for what that's going to mean for us. And that's a restricted revenue. It can only be used for EMS purposes. This is a legal restriction. And so what we have to do is match expenditures related to EMS to these revenues. So there's millions right now that's budgeted in our general fund, that's just general tax dollars covering, that will be moving to this dedicated revenue, which would free up money in the operating budget for other purposes. So that'll be a good thing. So it's too early to try and say too much about what this all means, but I believe we are looking at a better picture in this next budget, in this next 6-year operating plan, than we were last year, or even for the last handful of years. So you have to stay tuned on what that's all going to mean. Federal government, I'm not going to say a whole lot here because I can't even pretend to say I understand what's going on or what this is going to mean for us. And I don't intend this as a political comment at all. There might be people here who are saying, yes, go get them. But in a process way, in a mechanical way, this raises lots of questions for us. When you talk about stopping federal spending in a very broad way, federal money touches the county and related agencies in many ways. And if money does stop, there will be real consequences of those changes. One easy example, the school system, Title I, they have a lot of employees who are paid with federal money. They're not in any position to simply pick up those positions if the federal money goes away. So then you're left with questions of, okay, well, what happens next? And there's a long list of those questions. And like I say, it is so unclear that any attempt to try and figure out what this is going to mean is just really wasted time, I think. Let me turn to the state. They're up against a difficult budget. And one thing I want to talk about before we get into some of the details, I hear a lot of people saying, what in the world happened? They were sitting on a big surplus, now they've got a structural deficit. And this is not support for the governor or where the budget might go. I'm just saying it's not really how it happened. Even when there was a surplus at Maryland, and this goes back a number of years, they've been projecting a structural deficit for a long time. That was there. The surplus and the structural deficit existed at the same time. And you have to recognize they're two different things. The surplus is a result of what happened in one year. The structural deficit is what have we committed to and how much revenue do we think we're going to have. So you can yell at the state for a lot of things, but not for that one. The governor, his budget is out. He's given a balanced budget. I think it's reasonably easy to question some of how he gets to a balanced budget. And when I say I wasn't really supporting the governor earlier, I don't see any governor as a friend. I've been through a number of them now. And they do what they do, and it rarely is looked at from our point of view and what things are going to mean to us. But his budget, as it's proposed, is heavily dependent on legislative changes. His budget is only balanced if a long list of laws get changed. There's a thing called the BRFA, the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act. This is the place that captures all the legislation he needs to balance his budget. It was 132 pages long. So I'm not going to predict what legislation will pass and what won't, but I feel pretty confident saying he's not going to get all the legislation that he needs to balance this budget. But we don't know what pieces he'll get and what pieces he won't get. So again, a great deal of uncertainty. We don't know what's on the table now that isn't going to end up on the table. And if the General Assembly doesn't pass a piece of legislation, they still need to balance the budget. What is going to take the place of what the governor was looking for? And one real difficulty for us in our budget process is some of these decisions might not be made until near the end of the General Assembly. You're into the second week of April, and we're deep into our budget process by then. We could have some really big questions still hanging out there as we're trying to decide what is our budget going to look like. Oh yeah, and even if the governor's budget is exactly balanced as he has, there is a structural deficit, and they're still looking at about a $3 billion gap a handful of years into the future. Oh yeah, and on people commenting on the budget, like I said, there's plenty of room for criticism, plenty of room for questions. But I read a very long response to the budget by a legislator. And I got to the end, and I was just hit by all the things he pointed out that he didn't like about the budget, but offered not one suggestion on how to do it differently, or if not this, then this. And it's a common problem. Criticizing the choices that get made is very easy to do. The hard work is on thinking, okay, well, what am I willing to give up, or how much am I willing to pay to get this service? And that's not just a state thing. I mean, we go through it at the county as well. I don't know if I've said this before here, but a term I use a lot is there's a fundamental disconnect between what people want and what they're willing to pay. And it makes it all very challenging because people tend to be focused on, I don't want to pay that much, or I want more, but not on how do you put those two things together. And there was a law that was passed, not this year, by the General Assembly that could have a huge budget impact to them. But they took away time restrictions on filing sexual abuse charges. And there's a cap of $890,000, so it's not unlimited, but any case could potentially get an award of $890,000. There are 3,500 outstanding cases. Now, I'm not suggesting that all those cases are going to end up with rewards of $890,000, but if you do the math, you're talking about $3 billion. And that could impact them in this fiscal year. It's not even necessarily a future budget problem. It's a how do we pay this today? So that's going to be very interesting to see how that all plays out. Then there's the money the state sends to the counties and regulars. Know my usual rant about the thing they call aid to local government, which is 85% to schools, chunks to health departments, community colleges, libraries. Less than 10% of it actually comes to elected officials in counties or towns. So in that aid to local government, though, schools are up 6.2%, which sounds like a healthy increase, but it's important to recognize, and we're going to come back to Blueprint in a minute, that much of this money is specifically tied to Blueprint initiatives. It's not just money available to make things work in your school system. The increase that counties and towns are seeing, the part I would actually call aid to local government, is a 1.5% increase. Public schools is up 7 million, but again, with that note, much of it is tied to Blueprint. The community college up about $500,000, library about $30,000. If the governor's budget stands, or this piece of it at least, counties pay part of the cost of teacher pensions. A decade or so ago, the state gave us some of that responsibility. I still remember I was at a conference once where the state budget director was talking, and when this was a relatively new thing, and she thanked the people in the audience who were all local government for their partnership with the state on funding this. I was standing in the back of the room with somebody, and I said, yeah, this is a partnership, like somebody sticking a gun to your head and saying, give me your wallet. And then they added a piece of the retirement for community college, which is new. So we're already there on schools. The community college is a new piece. And once these doors are opened, who knows what goes through. And even in this session, it would not be shocking to me if we end up hearing from the state, no, we don't want 2.6 from you, we want 6.2 from you. The governor has passed, or is trying to pass, more of the cost of the State Department of Assessments and Taxation to counties. We pay half the cost now, which I would argue there's no valid reason for counties to be paying this. This is a state department with state employees, but we pay half of it now. The governor wants that to go to 90%. That'd be about a $500,000 new expenditure to us. That doesn't do anything new. It just means the state doesn't have to pay it, and now we do. Always worries for me when there's state budget problems is program open space, which is a state shared transfer tax that we use for our parks, and highway user revenue, which is state shared tax we use for our roads. Neither one of those appears to have been touched this year, and I really thought that we might see decreases there. But the story's not over yet. Remember, if the General Assembly doesn't pass everything the governor wants, they're gonna have to find other ways to make things work. And both of these, for the state, are easy places to go. They've done it many times in the past. So Blueprint. I don't think I've ever done this at one of these, but show of hands, how many people have heard of Blueprint? Okay, so that's pretty much everybody. Now, how many of you think you understand Blueprint? Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to see that, because you're right, you don't. It's incredibly complex. Much of it is not only not intuitive, it almost feels counterintuitive. I promise you that any of you who are paying attention to what's going to come out of meeting this law, you're going to have a moment where you're going to say, well, that can't be right, that doesn't make sense. And I'll agree with you, maybe it doesn't make sense, but that doesn't mean it's not right according to the law. Superintendent Cindy McCabe's back here, and Steve Guthrie was the superintendent during the decade when school enrollments were falling. We closed 3 schools. I shouldn't say we did not close schools. The school system closed schools. But I used to call Steve the unluckiest superintendent ever. But I have to think maybe Cindy's knocked him off of that pedestal. I concur. So Blueprint is a law. So any idea that the school system can ignore it, reject it, say we'll do this part but not that part, only works if you're going to say it's okay if we break the law. And I suspect they are not going to do that. And even if a jurisdiction chose to, the state does have a hammer here. Part of the law says they can withhold funding to a school system that is not meeting the law. And I believe it's up to 25% of the money. I'm not sure that that's true, but they can do it. But think about things that are counterintuitive. The penalty for not being able to meet the law would be taking away money that would make it even harder to meet the law. It's difficult I think, to follow the logic behind that kind of approach. There is one piece of the law that the governor has proposed changing, and a piece of blueprint wants to hire more teachers, so the teachers are spending 60% of their time in the classroom and 40% of their time on collaborative work, mentoring, professional development. At the beginning of all this, by the state's own assessment, they would need statewide 14,400 new teachers to do that. And I don't know anybody who believed that 14,400 teachers were available. So the governor has recognized that now and said, we're going to push this out 4 years. But that leads me to say, well, what is it that you think is going to happen in the next 4 years that's going to fundamentally change this problem? And I don't think there's any good answer to that. So the school system has a difficult budget to deal with, and they have this blueprint implementation, being compliant with blueprint. Now, these touch each other in lots of ways, but they are really two separate problems. Even without blueprint, there'd be certain budget challenges that they're up against. And blueprint is not, the problems with blueprint aren't really driven so much by these challenges as they are by what do you have to do to meet the requirements of the law. I'm going to try and give you some sense of the things that are going on, but again, I want you to remember, very, very complicated, very hard to understand. I don't want to give you any impression that I'm going to tell you enough that you're going to walk out of here saying, okay, I get it. I'm just giving you a touch the surface of the water kind of thing. But one of the big ideas in Blueprint is that there's a lot of money that has to follow certain students and go to their schools. That idea creates a lot of complications unless you have unlimited money. If you just have more money to say, okay, we'll give more money to those kids in those schools, this is not a problem. But the system doesn't have unlimited money. They're looking at, here's what we have, how do we make this work? And the very simple answer to that is they're going to have to take resources, mostly meaning teachers, from one school to another school because they need the money in this school to meet the requirements of the law. There's more to it than this, but much of this is driven by what they call compensatory education, what some of you may have heard of as FARMs, free and reduced meals. So these are kids who are coming from income challenged backgrounds. A lot of this is driven by getting more resources to those kids. And Carroll's problems were exacerbated this year in two different ways. One, the general population enrollment didn't grow very much, which means state funding they were expecting isn't going to come because the state funding is largely driven by enrollments, other than Blueprint money. But the other piece of this is, even though the enrollment didn't change very much, the number of students that they have in Comp Ed and also in multi-language language learners, which you might know as ESOL, those populations grew significantly. So they're not going to see any generally available state funding available. That was well said. But the kids that need the money to be attached to them are a larger piece of the picture now, which means more pressure on everything else. You know, on this idea of Comp Ed, something I worked through as I was trying to understand some stuff. If the targeted students were evenly dispersed around the county, this would not be the same kind of problem that we have. But they're not evenly dispersed, not even close to evenly dispersed. And I won't share the whole spreadsheet that I did, but just a few things that I took away from it. One, just going to give you two elementary schools to show you how uneven this is. Tawnytown Elementary School, 63% of the kids are comp ed. Carrolltown Elementary School is 12%. I mean, just think about the difference between those two schools. And if we look in a bigger way and just group them, and these are my groupings, not the school systems, but in the northwest part of the county, 47% of the kids are comp ed. In Westminster, 40%. In the northeast, 28. Mount Airy, 21. Finksburg, 20. And in the southeast, 15%. Those are big differences. And what this is going to mean, and the superintendent shared with her board yesterday the implementation plan for complying with Blueprint. So this is public knowledge. It's in the Times this morning. But what this is going to mean is a few different things. One is teachers are going to move from one school to another school. The school that's left behind is going to end up with higher class sizes. You're going to have fewer teachers for the same number of students. The schools they're going to will have smaller class sizes. They're going to have more teachers to serve the same number of students. And just a side note on that one, a question that we would need to deal with is there enough room in those schools for those teachers? And actually I haven't heard the school system talk about that one yet, but I'm sure it's on their minds. Also, because of the targeted nature of the funding, there's funding that's being used for other purposes that needs to be diverted to Blueprint to demonstrate that there's enough money in the right places, which means the school system has to go other places to find money. Part of this deal is going to be eliminating 90 positions. This is, again, mostly teachers that we're talking about. So another kind of counterintuitive thing, Blueprint is supposed to be leading us to better education for all students. I'm not sure anybody would make an argument that reducing the number of teachers is going to head you toward that goal. Now, a question that has come up, and some of you might be thinking about, is, well, can the commissioners do something to help? Now, that's partially dependent on the county's ability to offer up any other money. But even if you assume a money is available, another difficulty of Blueprint, county funding that we would give to the school system that would be applicable to Blueprint is subject to the same restrictions as the state funding is. So even though you might say, well, if you gave them $3 million, they could fix this problem, it won't work that way because it would just mean there's even more money that now has to follow those targeted students. It won't get you to where you want to go. If the commissioners wanted to fix this, and I'm going to say fix it within the limited constraints of the picture we have right now, if they came up with $44 million, the school system could implement Blueprint without these negative consequences I'm talking about. If the commissioners came up with another $3.5 million, they could balance their budget. If the commissioners came up with, I don't know what the number is, but just say $10 million for talking purposes, the school system could offer a salary increase to their employees. I didn't say that. Right now, there is no salary increase built into the school's budget. And I suspect that most Carroll County Public School employees aren't just going to say, oh, that's okay, never mind. But even in good times, there's no way the county could possibly come up with that level of resources to try and make this work. So we're left with all those problems I talked about are real and are going to remain real. And people, I believe a lot of people are going to be very angry about this. And I've been telling the commissioners, they're not just going to be yelling at the superintendent and the Board of Education, they're going to be yelling at you too. They have no authority to do anything here, but people are still going to be looking at them. Okay, I think if we're going to leave some time for questions, I probably have to end it there. Lots more I could say, but That'll probably give you enough to think about on the ride home. So, do we have any questions about any of this, or something I didn't talk about?
Yeah, I think you just repeat. Ted, at the State of the County address, the commissioners, and I'm going to bring it back to the EMS, the commissioners, and I think it was Commissioner Rothstein said, like, that they have not figured out how to completely fund that, the new EMS. Should I take that as what it is? And then you mentioned something about like the reimbursements, and you said, hey, there's going to be some money shifting. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit more? Just because that was a big thing where taking over the EMS increased costs. So just clear that up for us.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, yes. He was asking about the idea, a commissioner at the State of the County said we hadn't fully identified how to pay for the new EMS services we're providing. I wouldn't have said it quite like that. Now, if you go back to when we started this, we did take on a huge new expenditure without identifying how we were going to pay for it. But those costs are built into our plans now. So to say we don't know how we're going to pay for EMS doesn't really have any specific meaning other than to say it's part of our general budget problems. The one other piece, we talked a little bit earlier about the EMS billing. That does help. That covers some of the costs, but nowhere near the full cost. I mean, I'm glad we have it, but it doesn't make the problem go away for us. I thought for sure, and I know Mike was expecting a bunch of questions today.
I know we've got more questions.
I have a question. When you're doing projections, and all of this is complete guesstimates, but I know property tax is a source of funding, but as a South County parent, this sees what's happening to the close to 40 teachers being pulled out of the 3 high schools down here. What is that going to do to my property value, and in the long term, what is that going to do to the county budget? With suddenly we don't have the level of education, and people will decide to stay in Howard County or whatever. Not that every other county isn't also having this problem with an unfunded state mandate.
So she lives in South Carroll, is talking about teachers who will be taken out of the South Carroll high schools, wondering about the impact to her property values and to the county budget. And certainly an interesting question, but I can't pretend that I have an answer. This is new territory. You know, I don't have anything I can look back to and say, well, that time, here's what happened. We've never really experienced anything like this. And the idea of, you know, moving kids around schools, or teachers around schools, I'm sure we have not built the whole list of things that there's going to be to think about. Yeah, this is probably only of interest to me, but if nothing else, it'll give you a look in my mind. You know, every year the school system does a class size report, and they talk about average class sizes, different levels, how many classes above 30 do we have, how many below 15 or something like that do we have. And I thought about this. I said, well, what's this going to mean for the class size report? I mean, this almost in that format almost makes it useless, because we're going to be intentionally creating differences in class sizes over here and over here.
Ted, you touched on this, and I realize that there's no answer, but assuming that there's a massive federal employee layoff and that a significant number live in Maryland, how do you feel that could impact how the governor moves forward with the budget? And when would that hit? Would it be next year? I mean, how would that work?
Please repeat it.
Yeah, Lynn's asking about the potential federal changes and what that might mean to Maryland and to Carroll. And also very much on my mind, and Maryland, maybe Virginia, are the 2 states whose economies are most tightly tied to the federal government. So clearly, to the extent that there's danger, it's here. You know, in Carroll, I think I've seen a number that 8% of our workforce is in the federal government. So there's a very direct thing there. I mean, if those people lose their jobs, that has meaning to us. But that doesn't tell the whole story. Again, this might not be right, but I think I've seen things that said, for every federal employee, there are 3 private contractors doing federal work who don't show up on the list in the same way. So whatever that impact is, it's probably even bigger than we can imagine. But people lose their jobs, they don't have an income, we're not collecting income tax. People lose their house, impact on property tax. People decide to go somewhere else. You know, I'm not smart enough to try and chart what the impact of all those strings you could follow are, but clearly there's lots of things that could happen that are gonna impact us. And Lynn also asked, well, when? And again, I have no idea. I mean, some of it is happening now. I mean, there are things that have been shut down. There's funding that's been stopped. But I have no way to say exactly what that means to us. And we probably won't know until we see it. Oh, this changed. But there's so much more that could still happen. Whatever is happening now is probably not the whole story. But what is the whole story? How long does it take? What is the ripple effect over time? And I'm hoping this isn't as big as it looks like it could be, but I have no way to stand here and assure anybody that it's not going to have an impact. That's it. All right, well, oh, I have one more. Sorry. Yes.
So during the county budget discussions, we hear about the recreation tax and property tax and income tax. Is there any chance to look at doing a specialized tax towards the fire and EMS, like the safety tax? And has that ever come up in the conversation? Where genuinely everyone is benefiting from fire and EMS. It doesn't matter if you are in retirement age or you have school-age kids, like across the board. That is something that everyone living in Carroll County is benefiting from. By turning that tax that is towards the safety of our community, is that an option?
Yes, it's an option. And what she was asking about is a dedicated EMS tax. I'm aware of at least 2 Maryland jurisdictions that had fire EMS taxes, Montgomery and Frederick. I believe both of them have moved away from them. If you have those, they act pretty much like a property tax, except that the impact of homestead tax credit on how much your tax bills can go up doesn't apply to those. So in some ways, they're worse than a property tax. Nothing I've ever dug into deeply, but I suspect the reason they moved away from them was it was just complicating things. You know, it's like having a second property tax. And you know, dedicated taxes can get complicated. And we often hear people, well, I'd be willing to pay more taxes if it goes to this, or if it goes to this. But it's hard to get people to agree on those things. You know, what are you willing to do or not do? And I saw one lady talking about the school situation. She did some calculation that if everybody did $67 a month, $67 a year, that it could fix the problem. I don't know what her methodology was, but the thing is, I mean, she was saying she's willing to do it. That doesn't mean that everybody else is willing to do it.
Thanks, Ted. I think that's it. So a bit of a tough year. I always say to Ted, all I want is good news. That didn't happen for this year. So thank you. Yeah, you always try. I want to thank a few people. I want to thank Becky and Megan. They're around here somewhere. They do a lot of work at the chamber, and they're great to have on my team. Also want to thank Ted. Ted, this is, I don't know how many years you've been doing this, and he also does our Leadership Carroll Day for local government. He's been doing that forever, too. So he's a great guy, and the class gets a lot out of it. Speaking of Leadership Carroll, if you've never been, we have 2 spots left. I can't believe how quickly it's filled up. I'm talking about the class that starts in September. So we have 2 spots currently left, and if you'd like to come back and get to hear Ted for a full day, you should talk to me and we get you all signed up. Thanks to our sponsors, Brown Plus, Main Street Advisors, CMC, and Fairhaven. Brown Plus and Main Street Advisors, you guys have been doing this for so long. This is my 15th year. You've been here the whole time. I want to thank you especially for all the years. Give them some applause. These guys are great. And we're taking applications now for the Carroll Biz Challenge. How many people, by a show of hands, have heard of the Carroll Biz Challenge? Okay. Usually we get about 40 applications. You've got to be a local business. We've changed it up a little bit right now. It had been where your business couldn't have been going on for more than a year by the date of the event. Now we're saying more than 2 years. So we're giving a little bigger window. Or it doesn't even have to be started. It could be something you've got in mind. Please, you can go online. You can apply for free by going to carrollbizchallenge.com or carrollcountychamber.org. Last but not least, well, we've got a lot of events. You've got a little card on the kind of in front of you there. You can do the actual QR code and see all of our events. And you should be getting our emails. Last but not least, we're going on an amazing trip. You guys have seen we like to do a lot of, we have a lot of fun trips. We're going to Austria, Munich, and Italy in December, from like December 6th through the 16th, so just in time to get back for Christmas. But we're going to do the Christmas markets over there. It's a great trip. I've already got almost 60 folks signed up, and we have room for more. So other than that, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you guys here again for opening up your doors to us here. It's a beautiful place, and we'll see you guys at the next meeting. Thanks.